Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kivot Malkuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Shalom, everybody. This is Danny Palmer from Yachad Qahal here in Springfield, Missouri. Teacher, rabbi, whatever you prefer to call me. I'm not a stickler for either one. We hope that these teachings have been a blessing, as always. We're here to try to address some issues that I personally have never heard anybody out there addressing other than an occasional small scale. So, as I go through these, I know that these are issues that I never have heard any teacher in my life that I personally ever heard address some of these issues in the way they do. The issues overall I've heard many times, but certain aspects within those teachings I have never heard addressed at all. Now, we're in Pesach week. And I wanted to address an issue that I know, I knew this when I was in the church, when I was growing up, but I've discovered that many people are under this false assumption that when our brother Shaul refers to Yeshua as our Pesach lamb, that's referring to how he's our sin offering. The Pesach lamb is not a sin offering, and it has nothing to do with forgiveness. And that's what we're going to deal with today. I'm going to be doing a large amount of reading again this week, and I'm going to begin with Shemot, Exodus, chapter 12. Yah said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall mark for you the beginning of the months. It shall be the first of the months of the year for you. According to Yah, the official kingdom year begins in the spring." And another issue that many have been arguing over is after our Jewish kinsmen came out of Babylon and Persia after the 70 years of exile, and not all the Jews went into exile. The poor were left in the land. The Babylonians and the Persians didn't need any more poor. They had their own. They only took those who thought they could make use of in their kingdoms. But when they returned with a lot of Babylonian names for the months and everything. In the Torah, there is at least one place specifically when it gives instructions, and it talks about the month of Aviv. Well, it does not appear that according to the Torah, that Aviv was the name of the month, but when something happened, because Aviv means to bud. When you see the Aviv and it's the new moon, that is my personal belief, and I know that others that share that those two have to be in conjunction with one another. If you don't see the Aviv, that's not the beginning of the month for Pesach. Now, there are others who disagree with that, and that's your perspective. I'm not going to argue with you. That's not what I'm here for. But the beginning of the year for the kingdom is in the spring. He specifically told our forefathers this, all 12 tribes. "Speak to the whole community of Israel and say that on the 10th of this month, each of them shall take a lamb to a family, a lamb to a household." I don't know how many of you have ever paid attention, but the 10th of the month, in the first year of the month, and exactly 6 months later, the 10th day of the 7th month, is the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. These two are tied together. There's a reason why the two longest observances of the Moedim are in the spring and the fall. But if the household is too small for a lamb, let him share one with a neighbor who dwells nearby. In proportion to the number of persons, you shall contribute for the lamb according to what each household will eat. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a yearling male. You shall take it from the sheep or from the goats. I want you to keep that in mind. The Pesach lamb or goat must be a male. That's going to come into a factor when I read another portion having to deal with the sin offerings. You shall keep watch over it until the 14th day of this month, and if the assembled congregation of the Israelites shall slaughter it at twilight. They shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they are to eat it. They shall eat the flesh that same night. They shall eat it roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. Bitter herbs is another one. It is my opinion that all herbs are considered bitter because we were not initially allowed to eat them. Only after the fall in the garden did Yah tell us, hey, I gave the herbs to the animals, and if you want to behave like one, you can eat them too. But once again, that's just my own supposition. They shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they are to eat it. They shall eat the flesh that same night and eat it roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or cooked in any way with water, but roasted, head, legs, and entrails over the fire. This is the only time that no one was told to remove these parts. Apparently, according to the instructions, in the Hebrew and any other language you translate it into, apparently this lamb was supposed to be put onto it whole. And everything roasted over the fire. You shall not leave any of it over until morning. If any of it is left until morning, you shall burn it. This is how you shall eat it, with your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it hurriedly. It is a Passover offering to Yah. For that night I will go through the land of Egypt and strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and I will mete out punishments to all the elves of Egypt. I, Yah. And the blood on the houses where you are staying shall be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, so that no plague will destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This is the 10th and final plague in the list. The great and terrible day. This day shall be to you one of remembrance. You shall celebrate it as a festival to Yah throughout the ages. You shall celebrate it as an institution for all time. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the very first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day to the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. You shall celebrate a sacred occasion on the first day, and a sacred occasion on the 7th day. No work at all shall be done on them. Only what every person is to eat, that alone may be prepared for you. Unlike the weekly Shabbat, the high holy days, the Moedim, except for Yom Kippur, which is traditionally fasted on, you can go ahead and prepare meals that day. And I think it's partially because most of the Moedim can occur on the day before or day after the weekly Shabbat. They can even occur on the weekly Shabbat. That's where I'm in disagreement from some of those in the Jewish and Hebrew community. I believe you observe it on the day that it lands, even if it's Shabbat. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your ranks out of the land of Egypt. You shall observe this day throughout the ages as an institution for all time. In the first month, from the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at even. No leaven shall be found in your houses for 7 days. For whoever eats what is leavened, that person shall be cut off from the community of Israel. He's already said this twice. in the same passage. Twice he said, anyone who eats leaven shall be cut off from Israel, whether he is a stranger or a citizen of the country. Remember, the stranger, if he was circumcised, could eat the Pesach meal. You shall eat nothing leavened at all. In all your settlements you shall not eat leaven, but you shall eat unleavened bread. Now, I added a little bit there, and I want to read that in the way it actually says. You shall eat nothing leavened. In all your settlements you shall eat unleavened bread. I wanted to say that so you would catch it. We are commanded to eat unleavened bread at least once every day during the feast. And we are to avoid all leaven. Moses then summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, go pick out lambs for your families and slaughter the Passover offering. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and apply some of the blood that is in the basin to the lintel and the 2 doorposts. The lintel is the part of the door above. None of you shall go outside the door of his house until morning. For when Yah goes through to smite the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts, and Yah will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter and smite your home. You shall observe this as an institution for all time, for you and for your descendants. And when you enter the land that Yah will give you as he has promised, you shall observe this rite. And when your children ask you, what do you mean by this rite? You shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice to Yah, because he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he smote the Egyptians, but saved our houses. The people then bowed low in homage, and the Israelites went and did so. Just as Yah had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. Now the blood is primarily to protect the firstborn. But if everyone else stayed inside and kept the ruling on not going outside until morning, they didn't have anything to fear either. And you must understand how important the firstborn male is in culture. He's the one that picks up the responsibility of taking care of his parents when they get to the age they can no longer care for themselves. He receives a double portion. That's so he'll have to take care of them. He becomes the head of the family once the father is no longer able to fulfill those duties, whether he's dead or alive. The father is not usurped in his familial authorities as long as he's alive, but in his responsibilities that must be carried out physically, such as caring for the flocks or the crops. The firstborn would then take that over. In the middle of night, Yah struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on the throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the cattle. And Pharaoh arose in the night with all his courtiers and all the Egyptians, because there was a loud cry in Egypt, for there was no house where there was not someone dead. He summoned Moses and Aaron in the night and said, up, depart from among my people, you and the Israelites with you. Go worship Yah as you said. Take also your flocks and your herds as you said, and be gone, and may you bring a blessing upon me also. One thing that I have argued with others on is this Pharaoh himself could not have been a firstborn. He didn't die. It's quite likely his brother, before this incident occurs, has probably already died. Because it doesn't make any difference how old you were. If you were the firstborn son, boom, the firstborn to break his mother's womb. The Egyptians urged the people on, impatient to have them leave the country, for they said, we shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls wrapped in their cloaks upon their shoulders. The Israelites had done Moses' bidding and borrowed from the Egyptians objects of silver and gold and clothing. And Yah had disposed the Egyptians favorably toward the people, and they let them have their request. Thus they stripped the Egyptians. The Israelites journeyed from Ramesses to Sukkot, about 600,000 men on foot, aside from children. Moreover, a mixed multitude went up with them, and very much livestock, both flocks and herds, and they baked unleavened cakes of the dough that they had taken out of Egypt. For it was not leavened, since they had been driven out of Egypt, and could not delay, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. It's interesting that this word for mixed multitude, it comes from the same root of where we get the word evening. It is also the same word where we get the word Arav, which is one of the pronunciation of Arab. This is the letter Beit or Beit. It's the same letter, it just depends on the way that it's pronounced. If you look at a Masoretic text in the Hebrew, the way you tell the difference is one will have a dot in the center of it and the other one won't. The one with the dot in it is pronounced as we pronounce a B in English. If it doesn't have a dot, it's the way we pronounce a V in English. That's why some people say Abraham and others say Avraham. It's the same letter. The length of time that the Israelites lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430th year, to the very day, all the ranks of Yah departed from the land of Egypt. That was for Yah a night of vigil to bring them out of the land of Egypt. That same night is Yah's, one of vigil for all the children of Israel throughout the ages. Yah said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the law of the Passover offering. No foreigner shall eat of it, but any slave a man has bought may eat of it once he has been circumcised." This is the same rule that Abraham was given. Yah doesn't change. Abraham was told when the institution of circumcision was brought in to have a sign of the covenant. The sign of circumcision is to lay claim to getting to dwell in the land of the promise. Circumcision is not some religious rite. There were no members who ate the meal with Yeshua who were uncircumcised. No bound or hired laborer shall eat of it. It shall be eaten in one house. You shall not take any of the flesh outside the house, nor shall you break a bone of it. The whole community of Israel shall offer it. If a stranger who dwells with you would offer the Pesach or Passover to Yah, all his males must be circumcised. Then he shall be admitted to offer it. He shall then be as a citizen of the country, but no uncircumcised person may eat of it. There shall be one law for the citizen and for the stranger who dwells among you. And all the Israelites did so, as Yah had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. That very day Yah freed the Israelites from the land of Egypt, troop by troop. It's a very interesting thing here on the circumcision. All a male has to be is circumcised. That means our kinsmen, who are not Israelites, who are circumcised, could eat the Pesach with us. And I'm talking about our Arabic kinsmen, especially the descendants of Esau and Ishmael and the other 6 sons of Abraham. The specific thing it says about the Pesach is no uncircumcised male can eat it. Because the Pesach is about living in the land. Our Arab kinsmen are not evil because they're Arabs. The only thing that makes any Arab evil is when he tries to wipe out his own kinsmen. The events that are taking place in the Middle East, whether it's our Jewish kinsmen or our Arabic kinsmen, they're not something we should be taking any joy in. This bloodshed was prophesied. But if you know prophecy, Yah said prophecy does not have to come out that way if we will change and do it differently. Prophecy is a warning. It's not set in stone. Yah told Jonah, to go to Nineveh and tell them to repent of the sins they were committing. I've told many people, I said, the prophet that I think had the most faith, in my opinion, is Jonah. And they look at me like I'm crazy. I go, you don't understand. Jonah did not want to go to Nineveh because he did not want Nineveh to be forgiven. If you understand the history of what was going on between the Assyrian Empire and the northern kingdom of which Jonah was part of, you would understand. Jonah did not want to go because he knew if Nineveh repented, Yah would forgive them. So he tried to go the opposite way. They're not going to get a chance to repent because I don't want them to have that opportunity. I want them to get what they deserve. And he was even angry at the very closing of the book that holds his name, that Yah didn't punish Nineveh. Yah spoke further to Moses, saying, consecrate to me every firstborn man and beast. The first issue of every womb among the Israelites is mine. And Moses said to the people, remember this day on which you went free from Egypt, the house of bondage, how Yah freed you from it with a mighty hand. No leavened bread shall be eaten. You shall go free on this day in the month of Abib. There's the word I was telling you about, the month of Abib, or Aviv. It never says that's the name of the month. So when Yah has brought you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, you shall observe in this month the following practice. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a festival of Yah. Throughout the 7 days unleavened bread shall be eaten. No leavened bread shall be found with you, and no leaven shall be found in all your territory. And you shall explain to your son on that day, it is because of what Yah did for me when I went free from Egypt. And this shall serve you as a sign on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead, in order that the teaching of Yah may be in your mouth, that with a mighty hand Yah freed you from Egypt. You shall keep this institution at its set time from year to year. And when Yah has brought you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and to your fathers, and has given it to you, you shall set apart for Yah every first issue of the womb. Every male firstling that your cattle drop shall be Yah's. And in this particular verse, the term cattle is essentially covering the goats, sheep, and what we call cows. But every firstling ass you shall redeem with a sheep. If you do not redeem it, you must break its neck. And you must redeem every firstborn male among your children. And when in time to come your son asks you, saying, what does this mean? You shall say to him, it was with a mighty hand that Yah brought us out from Egypt in the house of bondage, when Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, and Yah slew every firstborn in the land of Egypt, the firstborn of both man and beast. Therefore I sacrifice to Yah every first male issue of the womb, that redeem every firstborn among my sons. And so it shall be a sign upon your hand and as a symbol on your forehead, that with a mighty hand Yah freed us from Egypt. The firstborn male is the most focused on here. Among the sacrificial animals, the firstborn male from every female is automatically Yah's, and it cannot be redeemed. It has to serve as a sacrifice. The firstborn males, we are commanded to redeem them. Instruction is later given on what that redemption price is. It's not free. Think of Hannah, the mother of Shemuel. She didn't have any children herself. Shemuel became her firstborn after she prayed, because she promised, I will give him to you. As soon as Shemuel is born and old enough, Hannah takes Shemuel and turns him over to Eli, the high priest at the time. The very same high priest that when he had seen her years earlier at one of the feasts, praying with only her lips moving, chastised her for being drunk. She had to tell him she hadn't drunk a drop. And she told him what she was praying for him. And he said, Yah will be with you and he will give you what you've asked for. And so Shemuel most likely was not paid the redemption price because he was returned immediately to Yah by his mother. His mother went on and had more children. We don't know what their names are or anything, or whether they were male and female or what. This is an act of a woman who wanted a child so bad. She said, I'll give to you my firstborn if you'll let me be a mother. How many of you know what that feels like? You know, one of the things that I have seen, and I know how it feels myself. I've never been married. I've never had a child. I've never met the right woman. And in not meeting the right woman, I've obviously not been the right man for any of the women I've met. So it goes both ways. But I've heard many stories recently across the nation of men who have not had children yet, wishing they had. I know it's not exactly the same as the woman, but I think he's putting a heart in all people. You know, the Egyptians tried to destroy us by destroying the firstborn sons. People never stop and think about, well, the firstborn females. Oh, the Egyptians figured, well, you know, we can eliminate Israel because if we kill all the male children when they're born, then the females will have to marry Egyptians or other people, and they won't be Israelites anymore. They will be assimilated by marriage. It's one of the things that the Jewish part of my heritage has had to deal with. How do you keep your identity and not look like you're aloof from all the rest of humanity? Sometimes that part of the family hasn't done that good of a job. But the other side of the family, the northern kingdom side, especially under Yosef and the tribe of Manasseh, we blended in way too well. We lost our identity. Only in these days, maybe in the last 100 years or so, as Yah began to open the eyes of various people from the 10 tribes around the world. And make no mistake, we're everywhere. Yah said he would scatter us among all the nations. We would marry into them. We would blend into them so much that we wouldn't even remember who we are. It's been about 2,700 years since the scattering of the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes. And that's why they're called the lost sheep, because they don't even know who they are. They don't even know they're Israel. How many of you have had that feeling and you got drawn into the Torah? Maybe you started out in the church, maybe you didn't start out with anything at all. And you've got drawn maybe firstly towards our Jewish kinsmen and their study of the Torah, and then you've progressed on from there because maybe some of the Jewish kinsmen that you were associating with and doing some of your learning under, they didn't believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. And you hadn't lost that. And remember, it's not about religion. It's about the kingdom. It's about a nation, a people called by Yah, our Creator. Chosen doesn't mean we're better than everybody else's. Chosen means we have a mission that nobody else has, and our mission is to be a light. And unfortunately, we have not done a good job. In fact, we spent more time blending in with the very people that we were supposed to be an object to want to change because, hey, how come things are better for them? Well, it's kind of hard for people to be envious of you for things being better If you're living just like they are and you're having the same trouble they are, why change? They're not any different than we are. They're having the same struggles, the same difficulties. So why change? Now I'm going to address what I said I was going to address about the Pesach lamb and how it's not a sin offering. It's a rescue or a salvation offering. It's not a sin offering. And it's going to be in Vayikra or Leviticus chapters 4 and 5. Yah spoke to Moses saying, "Speak to the Israelite people thus, when a person unwittingly incurs guilt in regard to any of Yah's commandments about things not to be done, and does one of them, if it is an anointed priest who has incurred guilt, so that blame falls upon the people, he shall offer for the sin of which he is guilty a bull of the herd without blemish as a sin offering to Yah." The priest that's anointed. This word anointed is telling us Mashiach, or Messiah. Those of you who are Christians who use the term Christ, the idea of a Messiah is someone who's had oil poured over them. And it's not what you think. I'm going to get further into that later. But the very first person who's mentioned as a Mashiach in Scripture is Aharon, Aaron, Moshe's brother, the very first high priest, the first Kohen Hagadol. And he'll excuse me. It's that time of year when the seasons are changing, and I am just slightly congested. So if you will pardon that, probably drink a little more liquid than usual. But that time will come to an end one day, when all things will be made right, and we don't have to deal with this anymore. I'm looking forward to that. It'd be nice to know what it's like. Not have to worry about disease anymore. Sickness. He shall bring the bull to the entrance of the tent of meeting before Yah, and lay his hand upon the head of the bull. Notice for the Kohen, the high priest, it is a bull, a male. The bull shall be slaughtered before Yah, and the anointed priest, the Mashiach Kohen, shall take some of the bull's blood and bring it into the tent of meeting. The reason I wanted so much to point out the word anointed having to do with what a Mashiach is even some of our Jewish kinsmen have never been taught this. I was surprised when I discovered that they didn't know it, because I was taught it in the church. Of course, I always wondered that the other people I went to church with when this was taught, how come they didn't catch it when it was taught? Maybe it's because he had opened a part of my mind and my eyes at that time that I didn't realize till later. I think it's exactly it. The priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle the blood 7 times before Yah in front of the curtain of the shrine. The priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of aromatic incense, which is in the tent of meeting before Yah, and all the rest of the bull's blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Now the altar of incense, the only blood that can ever be put on it is on the horns. No meat or any other type of offering other than the incense was ever to be offered on this altar. This was just inside the holy. Not the Holy of Holies, but the holy. It's not in the outside where the sacrificial altar is at. But the coals were removed from the sacrificial altar to burn the incense. He shall remove all the fat from the bull of sin offering, the fat that covers the entrails, and the fat that is about the entrails, the 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them, that is at the loins, and the protuberance of the liver, which he shall remove with the kidneys, just as it is removed from the ox of the sacrifice of well-being. The priest shall turn them into smoke on the altar of burnt offering, with the hide of the bull and all its flesh, as well as its head and its legs, its entrails and its dung. All the rest of the bull he shall carry to a clean place outside the camp, to the ash heap, and burn it up in a wood fire. It shall be burned on the ash heap. The thing about a sin offering is nothing is spared for the priest. When it's the high priest himself, the anointed priest, which Aaron and all 4 of his sons were anointed. So they were all Mashiachs, Messiahs. Everything's burned up. And the interesting thing is there's only one fire in Scripture that is talked about that Yah gives the instruction it is never allowed to go out. That is the one on the sacrificial altar. So eternal burning up sin, burning up other things, burning it up permanently. If it is the whole community of Israel that is erred, and the matter escapes the notice of the congregation, so that they do any of the things which by Yah's commandments ought not to be done, and they realize their guilt, when the sin through which they incurred guilt becomes known, the congregation shall offer a bull of the herd as a sin offering, and bring it before the tent of meeting. The elders of the community shall lay their hands on the head of the bull before Yah, and the bull shall be slaughtered before Yah. The anointed priest shall bring some of the blood of the bull into the tent of meeting, and the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle of it 7 times before Yah in front of the curtain. Some of the blood he shall put on the horns of the altar which is before Yah in the tent of meeting, and all the rest of the blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. He shall remove all its fat from it and turn it into smoke on the altar. He shall do with this bull just as is done with the priest's bull of sin offering. He shall do the same with it. Thus the priest shall make expiation for them, and they shall be forgiven. He shall carry the bull outside the camp and burn it as he burned the first bull. It is the sin offering of the congregation. This is the sin offering of the community. It is a bull, a male. In case is a chieftain who incurs guilt by doing unwittingly any of the things which by the commandment of Yah, his El, ought not to be done, and he realizes his guilt, or the sin of which he is guilty, is brought to his knowledge, he shall bring as his offering a male goat without blemish. A leader who is not a priest brings a goat. He shall lay his hands upon the goat's head, and it shall be slaughtered at the spot where the burnt offering is slaughtered before Yah. It is a sin offering. The priest shall take with his finger some of the blood of the sin offering and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering. All its fat he shall turn into smoke on the altar, like the fat of the sacrifice of well-being. Thus the priest shall make expiation on his behalf for his sin, and he shall be forgiven. And here's where it gets interesting. If any person from among the populace unwittingly incurs guilt by doing any of the things which by Yah's commandments ought not to be done, and he realizes his guilt, or the sin of which he is guilty is brought to his knowledge, he shall bring a female goat without blemish as his offering for the sin of which he is guilty. He shall lay his hand upon the head of the sin offering, and the sin offering shall be slaughtered at the place of the burnt offering. The priest shall take with his finger some of its blood and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and all the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar. He shall remove all its fat, just as He shall remove all its fat, just as the fat is removed from the sacrifice of well-being, and the priest shall turn it into smoke on the altar, for a pleasing odor to Yah. Thus the priest shall make expiation for him, and he shall be forgiven. If the offering he brings as a sin offering is a sheep, he shall bring a female without blemish. He shall lay his hand upon the head of the sin offering, and it shall be slaughtered as a sin offering at the spot where the burnt offering is slaughtered. The priest shall take with his finger some of the blood of the sin offering and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering. And all the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar. And all its fat he shall remove, just as the fat of the sheep of the sacrifice of well-being is removed. And this the priest shall turn into smoke on the altar over Yah's offering by fire. Thus the priest shall make expiation on his behalf for the sin of which he is guilty, and he shall be forgiven. It's a female offering for my personal sin. Communally, it's male. If I were a specific leader within the community, it'd be a male. If I was a Cohen, it would be a male. But as your average, ordinary, everyday citizen, my sin offering has to be a female. Think about that. How did Yeshua take care of that? I know. And I've mentioned it in a past video. If a person incurs guilt when he has heard a public imprecation, and although able to testify as one who has either seen or learned of the matter, he does not give information so that he is subject to punishment. Oh, if you know evidence or have heard of it, you are required by the Torah to bring it before the officials. Otherwise, you're guilty of sin. Or when a person touches any unclean thing, be it the carcass of an unclean beast, or the carcass of unclean cattle, or the carcass of an unclean creeping thing, and the fact has escaped him, and then being unclean, he realizes his guilt. Or when he touches human uncleanness, any such uncleanness, whereby one becomes unclean, and though he has known it, the fact has escaped him, but later he realizes his guilt. Or when a person utters an oath to bad or good purpose, whatever a man may utter in an oath, and though he has known it, the fact has escaped him, but later he realizes his guilt in any of these matters. When he realizes his guilt in any of these matters, he shall confess that within he has sinned, and he shall bring as his penalty to Yah for the sin of which he is guilty a female from the flock, sheep or goat, as a sin offering, and the priest shall make expiation on his behalf for his sin. But if his means do not suffice for a sheep, he shall bring to Yah as his penalty for that of which he is guilty 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. He shall bring them to the priest, the Cohen, who shall offer first the one for the sin offering, pinching its head at the nape without severing it. He shall sprinkle some of the blood of the sin offering on the side of the altar, and what remains of the blood shall be drained out at the base of the altar. It is a sin offering. And the second he shall prepare as a burnt offering, according to regulation. Thus the priest shall make expiation on his behalf for the sin of which he is guilty, and he shall be forgiven. And if his means do not suffice for 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, he shall bring as his offering for that of which he is guilty 1/10 of an ephah of choice flour for a sin offering. He shall not add oil to it or lay frankincense on it, for it is a sin offering. He shall bring it to the priest, and the priest shall scoop out of it a handful as a token portion of it, and turn it into smoke on the altar. With Yah's offerings by fire, it is a sin offering. Thus the priest shall make expiation on his behalf for whichever of these sins he is guilty, and he shall be forgiven. It shall belong to the priest like the meal offering. And Yah spoke to Moses, saying, when a person commits a trespass, being unwittingly remiss about any of Yah's sacred things, he shall bring as his penalty to Yah a ram without blemish from the flock, convertible into payment in silver by the sanctuary weight as a guilt offering. He can bring the animal or have it converted into monetary means, but still go to the service of the sanctuary. He shall make restitution for that wherein he was remiss about the sacred things, and he shall add a 5th part to it, and give it to the priest. The priest shall make expiation on his behalf with the ram of the guilt offering, and he shall be forgiven. And when a person without knowing it sins in regard to any of Yah's commandments about things not to be done, and then realizes his guilt, he shall be subject to punishment. He shall bring to the priest a ram without blemish from the flock, or the equivalent as a guilt offering. The priest shall make expiation on his behalf for the error that he committed unwittingly, and he shall be forgiven. It is a guilt offering. He has incurred guilt before Yah. Yah spoke to Moses, saying, when a person sins and commits a trespass against Yah by dealing deceitfully with his fellow, in the matter of a deposit or a pledge, or through robbery, or by defrauding his fellow, or by finding something lost and lying about it, if he swears falsely regarding any of the various things that one may do and sin thereby, when one is thus sinned and realizing his guilt, he would restore that which he got through robbery or fraud, or the deposit that was entrusted to him, or the lost thing that he found, or anything else about which he swore falsely. He shall repay the principal amount and add a fifth part to it. He shall pay it to its owner when he realizes his guilt. Then he shall bring to the priest as his penalty to Yah a ram without blemish from the flock, or the equivalent as a guilt offering. The priest shall make expiation on his behalf before Yah, and he shall be forgiven for whatever he may have done to draw blame thereby. Well, interesting. The firstborn male is a sacrificial animal except for sin. This is how important it is. Anyone who knows anything about animal husbandry, the raising of livestock, if you're going to kill an animal, it's going to be a male. Because the females reproduce. And in the livestock, you don't need a male for every female. It's very critical when Yah says to use a female in the livestock. The only other real time that a female is used, other than these specific offerings here, is the ashes of a red heifer. Those of you who have heard the passage from Hebrews about it's no longer by the blood of bulls and goats or the ashes of a red heifer. Well, the blood of bulls and goats is referring to Yom Kippur. The ashes of a red heifer. The red heifer was completely burnt, every bit of it, even its excrement. And those ashes were taken, mixed with water, living water. That means taken from a source where the water moved, like a spring or a river. And then they were sprinkled upon a person who had come in contact with a dead human body. It takes 7 days for that impurity to be reconciled. And the instructions say that on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, those 2 times, those ashes and that water must be sprinkled upon the person who is impure. And if you are impure, you cannot eat the Pesach. If you've been around a dead human body and you haven't fulfilled the 7-day cycle. Yeshua was executed outside the city gates of Jerusalem. You may not have any idea how every offering Yeshua fulfilled and how he had to do it and what happened that one day. Outside the gates is where the ashes of the red heifer had to be taken. It's also where all the other byproducts of the sacrificial animals were taken out to be burned. The interesting thing about the ashes of the red heifer is whoever was sprinkled with the ashes of the red heifer, especially after the 7th day, became clean. But every other person who had anything to do with the acquisition of those ashes, even the priest himself who sprinkled the ashes on the person, became unclean. And just off the top of my head, I believe there were 4, maybe 5 individuals in succession who each time they did their portion became unclean because of what this particular heifer was going to be used for. Now, they were only unclean for one day because it was an animal. But they became unclean. But you know what? They became unclean so somebody else could become clean. That's what it's referring to when it says the greater of the mitzvah. Or when Yeshua talks about, you mess with the lesser things and you let the greater things slide. And of course I'm putting that in modern terminology. Worry about the greater things. And if something slips by, let it be one of the lesser things. Doesn't mean we're supposed to intentionally let it slip by, but if something slips by, be more worried and more concerned about the greater sins than about the lesser. And because of the time of year it is, and because of the linking of the sin offerings, which are not linked to Pesach. The one day in the whole year that the sin offerings are so vital is Yom Kippur. They can be given all year long, but the one day they are so important. And Yom Kippur doesn't deal with my sin or any other person individually. It deals with our sins community. There was a bull brought because that bull allowed the purification of the priest and the community. The goats have to do with leadership. Remember, they're all males. None of those have to do with my personal sin or any other. The only personal sin offerings that are allowed to be brought are also tied to their roles. That's the priest and leaders, individual leaders. Theirs was a dual because of the office, the responsibility they held. They were allowed to bring a male. But every other average citizen had to bring a female. And what a cost it would be. What a cost that would be that if you realize that I personally committed a sin and I've got to kill a female. She's the one that carries the young around in her womb, who bears that young. And to kill a female is a big deal financially for a shepherd or a cattle herd. We're going to deal with Vayikra, Leviticus 23. And the rest of the readings are going to be a little shorter because I've touched on the main ones that I wanted to bring the whole chapter or chapters out. And I'm going to go and read the first 8 verses. Yah spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, These are my fixed times, the fixed times of Yah, which you shall proclaim as a sacred occasion." These are also what's referred to in English as the appointed times, or the Moedim in Hebrew. These are the times Yah says, you don't forget these. I set them aside because of my relationship with you and your relationship with me, both individually and communally. We're supposed to gather with others on these occasions. Remember, Yeshua said, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in his name, there's he also. He doesn't promise that if there's only one. Now, if there's a case where somebody, because of circumstances, was all by themselves, that would be a little different matter. Y'all takes that into account. As I said, if you please excuse me, I'm just a little congested. I think it may be because of some of the pollen or whatever in the air. And what's really important is the very first of the list. And most people have been taught it's not even important. On 6 days work may be done, but on the 7th day there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest, a sacred occasion. You shall do no work. It shall be a Sabbath of Yah throughout your settlements. The very first one that's mentioned is the one that happens every 7th day. To gather with others. These are the set times of Yah, the sacred occasions when you shall celebrate each at its appointed time. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at twilight, there shall be a Passover offering to Yah. And on the 15th day of that month, Yah's feast of unleavened bread, you shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days. On the first day you shall celebrate a sacred occasion. You shall do no work at your occupations. 7 days shall you make offerings by fire to Yah. The 7th day shall be a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupations. The idea here is don't do the work that you normally do on the 6 working days of the week. When these days fall on a working day in the year, that working day becomes another Shabbat, another day of rest. In the feast offerings, there's some very interesting things that many people don't realize. There are a lot of people who have studied and are familiar with Leviticus chapter 23. But unfortunately, many of them don't realize there's additional information in Bamidbar, chapter 28 and 29. And correlating to Pesach right here, it's going to go to verse 16 of chapter 28. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, there shall be a Passover sacrifice to Yah. And on the 15th day of that month, a festival, unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. The first day shall be a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupation. You shall present an offering by fire, a burnt offering to Yah. 2 bulls of the herd, 1 ram, and 7 yearling lambs. See that they are without blemish. The meal offering with them shall be of choice of a measure for a bull, 2/10 for a ram, and for each of the 7 lambs prepare 1/10 of a measure. And there shall be 1 goat for sin offering to make expiation in your behalf. You shall present these in addition to the morning portion of the regular burnt offering. You shall offer the like daily for 7 days as food, an offering by fire of pleasing odor to Yah. They shall be offered with their libations in addition to the regular burnt offering. And the 7th day shall be a sacred occasion for you. You shall not work at your occupations. The offerings presented in Leviticus 23 are joined by those mentioned in Numbers 28 and 29. Every day of the 7th days of unleavened bread, these offerings were to be presented. There is even a very misunderstood section relating to Yom Kippur, because most people only believe that a bull and 2 goats had anything to do with that day. I'm going to show you here in Numbers 29, here just a little bit, how that is inaccurate. Personal sin is not dealt with, only communal national sin is purged on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur has no individual sin offering. I mentioned that. We will go back to Leviticus 23 and read the section on Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur and Pesach, or unleavened bread, are so tied together. They're like bookends. And it'll be verse 26. Yah spoke to Moses, saying, Mark the 10th day of this 7th month is the Day of Atonement. It shall be a sacred occasion for you. You shall practice self-denial, and you shall bring an offering by fire to Yah. You shall do no work throughout that day, for it is a day of atonement on which expiation is made on your behalf before Yah your El. Indeed, any person who does not practice self-denial throughout that day shall be cut off from his kin. And whoever does any work throughout that day, I will cause that person to perish from among his people. Do not work, whatever it is for a law for all times, throughout the ages in all your settlements. It shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for you. You shall practice self-denial on the 9th day of the month at even, from evening to evening. You shall observe this, your Sabbath. This is traditionally observed by our Jewish kinsmen and others by fasting. This is the, you shall afflict yourself, as some of the translations say. Now going back to Numbers 29 and dealing with the Yom Kippur section in Numbers 29. And it's verses 7 through 11. On the 10th day of the 7th month you shall observe a sacred occasion when you shall practice self-denial. You shall do no work. You shall present to Yah a burnt offering of pleasing odor. 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, 7 yearling lambs. See that they are without blemish. The meal offering with them of choice flour with oil mixed in shall be 3/10 of a measure for a bull, 2/10 for the 1 ram, 1/10 for each of the 7th lambs, and there shall be 1 goat for a sin offering, in addition to the sin offering of expiation, and the regular burnt offering with its meal offering, each with its libation. When it says, along with the regular offering, that's referring to the morning and the evening sacrifice that was done every day of the week, and 3 times on Shabbat. So there was a lot more offerings going on than people realize, because most people have not been introduced to Numbers chapters 28 and 29 having to do with what are referred to as the high holy days. The Chag. You know, for Yom Kippur, essentially only the priests and Levites did the function. The high priest basically did almost everything. He's the one that took care of the bulls, the bull, and the 2 goats, and made sure that the assignments that everyone else had to carry out were carried out. One time a year he got to go into the Holy of Holies and sprinkle the blood there at the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant. The Ark is not the covenant. The Ark held the covenant. The Ark was the throne of Yah. Whenever the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night resided over the holy, you should get a picture of the king sitting on his throne. It's the very presence of Yah. Note that the bull and 2 goats are not the only offerings on the Day of Atonement. What is a Mashiach? I told you that earlier. It's one who has been anointed with oil, poured on them. And it is for an assignment, not the person themselves. As I said, Aharon is the first person mentioned, and that the term Mashiach in Hebrew shows up in the Torah text. As I said, his 4 sons were also anointed. But interestingly, 2 of those 2 Mashiachs died when Yah put them to death, when they brought strange fire. Nadav and Avihu. Shaul, King Shaul, was anointed by the prophet Samuel, to fill the role of the king. Shaul had that stripped from him, and David was also anointed by Shemuel. Yeshua was anointed with oil, but most of you probably can't tell me when. Yet in the very passage it happens, Yeshua said we wouldn't forget the person that did it, or did it. Little grammatical error there, especially from a guy who enjoys using proper grammar. enjoys learning more and more words. But I want to go to the event in Matthew, in chapter 26. And we're going to go backwards from here. Now this happens after the event that I'm going to tell you and show you in the earlier chapter in Matthew. And when Yeshua was in Beit Anya in the house of the potter, Shimon, a woman approached him who had with her an alabaster vase of ointment, which was a very precious perfume, and she poured it upon the head of Yeshua while he was reclining. And his disciples saw it, and it displeased them, and they said, "Why this waste? For it was able that this be sold for much money and be given to the poor." But Yeshua knew this and said to them, "Why are you troubling the woman? For she has done a good deed for me. For you will always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. But the one who poured this perfume upon my body, she did it as though for my burial. And truly I say to you that whenever the good news is preached, the thing that she did, this will also be told in all the world as a memorial to her." You know, when I realized what this passage was talking about, when Yah opened my eyes, this is when he was anointed. From this point on, to Israel, he could actually say, "I am the Mashiach," because he was witnessed by many individuals in this home to be anointed. And even his own disciples, the Talmudim, didn't realize what happened until Yeshua told them what happened. How many have heard this deed from the woman mentioned when they've heard the good news? I have to admit to you, I never heard it in my life until he brought it to my attention. I knew this story, but it never dawned on me how important that event is. And it's going to correlate back to something in Matthew chapter 16. And when Yeshua came to the region of Caesarea of Philippi, he was asking his disciples and said, "Concerning me, who do men say that I am? Merely a son of man?" And they said, "Some say Yochanan the Immerser, others say Eliyahu, and others Yirmiyahu, or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Shimon Kepha said, "You are the Mashiach, the son of the living Elohim." Yeshua answered him and said, "Blessed are you, Shimon, the son of Jonah, because flesh and blood have not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." They knew he was the Mashiach, yet nobody had seen him anointed yet. And apparently when they actually did see him anointed, they missed it. Because it was a woman that did it. Not to demean women, but in the culture they were in, did they completely let it slip by and not realize it? And these were not men who mistreated women. They've got a bad rap. Anybody that tells you that the women of that day were disregarded, had no value, no, that's an error, a complete error. And now I'm going to wrap up in the very end of this teaching by going someplace you probably wouldn't expect me to go. Let me go back to Bereshit, chapter 9. And I'm going to read you something. It has to do with Yeshua. Remember, Yeshua said, he told everybody about himself, starting with Moshe and going through the rest of the prophets. But in Bereshit 9, verses 5 and 6, Noach is given some instructions after they leave the ark. But for your own lifeblood I will require a reckoning. I will require it of every beast. Of man too will I require a reckoning for human life. Of every man for that of his fellow man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For in his image did El make man. He said if any animal kills a man, or any man kills another man, human being is what it's saying here. Any human being kills another human being, or any animal kills a human being, their life is to be forfeit. This is the only case of atonement for any sin that can be paid with your own blood. And that does not mean you don't need redemption. That's not what I'm saying at all. And to tie this into the Torah, an instruction is even given greater to Israel at Mount Sinai in Bamidbar, chapter 35, verses 12 on through the chapter. The cities shall serve you as a refuge for the avenger, so that the manslayer may not die unless he has stood trial before the assembly. The towns that you thus assign shall be 6 cities of refuge in all. 3 cities shall be designated beyond the Jordan, and the other 3 shall be designated in the land of Canaan. They shall serve as cities of refuge. These 6 cities shall serve the Israelites and the resident aliens among them for refuge, so that anyone who kills a person unintentionally may flee there. Anyone, however, who strikes another with an iron object so that death results is a murderer. The murderer must be put to death. That's after he's found guilty. If he struck him with a stone tool that could cause death, and death resulted, he is a murderer. The murderer must be put to death. Similarly, if the object with which he struck him was a wooden tool that could cause death, the death resulted, he is a murderer. The murderer must be put to death. The blood avenger himself shall put the murderer to death. It is he who shall put him to death upon encounter. The blood avenger is a kinsman. So too, if he pushed him in hate or hurled something at him on purpose and death resulted, or if he struck him with his hand in enmity and death resulted, the assailant shall be put to death. He is a murderer. The blood avenger shall put the murderer to death upon encounter. But if he pushed him without malice aforethought, or hurled any object at him unintentionally, or inadvertently dropped upon him any deadly object of stone, and death resulted, though he was not an enemy of his, and did not seek his harm, in such cases the assembly shall decide between the slayer and the blood avenger. The assembly shall slay the manslayer from the blood avenger, and the assembly shall restore him to the city of refuge. Oh, I'm sorry, I misread that. My eyes jumped there. Though he was not an enemy of his, and did not seek his harm, in such cases the assembly shall decide between the slayer and the blood avenger. The assembly shall protect the manslayer from the blood avenger, and the assembly shall restore him to the city of refuge to which he fled, and there he shall remain until the death of the high priest, who was anointed with the sacred oil, the Mashiach. Again. But if the manslayer ever goes outside the limits of the city of refuge of which he has fled, and the blood avenger comes upon him outside the limits of his city of refuge, and the blood avenger kills the manslayer, there is no blood guilt on his account. The person who's been found not guilty because he did not intend to kill somebody, if he left the city, he put his life in his own hands, and if the blood avenger kills him while he's outside, the blood avenger is guilty of no crime. The individual broke the rule and put his own self in jeopardy. For he must remain inside his city of refuge until the death of the high priest. After the death of the high priest, the manslayer may return to his land holding. Such shall be your law of procedure throughout the ages in all your settlements. And if anyone kills a person, the manslayer may be executed only on the evidence of witnesses. The testimony of a single witness against a person shall not suffice for a sentence of death. You may not accept a ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of a capital crime. He must be put to death. nor may you accept ransom in lieu of flight to a city of refuge, enabling one to return to live on his land before the death of the priest. You shall not pollute the land in which you live, for blood pollutes the land, and the land can have no expiation for blood that is shed on it, except by the blood of him who shed it. You shall not defile the land in which you live, in which my people live. I abide. For I, Yah, abide among the Israelite people. Yeshua died outside the city gates. Who was inside the city gates? The high priest. Yeshua wasn't running. Remember what he told Pilate. No man takes my life. I lay it down freely. Yeshua was the kinsman avenger and the kinsman redeemer, all in one package. He had to kill the one who was guilty. He took our guilt of all of humanity upon him. And the only person who could take his life is the kinsman avenger. He had to be taken outside the city gates so that he could give up his life. Now, if you want to check out further details, I have pointed this out in a previous teaching that has become very popular among many, called the Kinsman Redeemer, and it's under the Covenant series, just like this one is. And there's some more greater detail, and we provide some verses and everything that you can check into all the information that I give you. And this is a subject you ought to be interested in learning about, the Kinsman Redeemer. Now here's how Yeshua took our sin. This is going to be how we close. And that's at Yahoo 26, verses 26 through 29. And while they were dining, Yeshua took bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to his disciples and said, "Take, eat. This is my body." And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them and said, "Take, drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the renewed covenant, which for the sake of many is shed for the forgiveness of sins. And I say to you, I will not drink this fruit of the vine from now on until the day in which I drink it anew with you in the kingdom of my Father, of Elohim." Yeshua drank the cup that night so that he could take our sins. Because Yeshua walked through those pieces with Abraham along with Yah the Father. Yeshua represented us. Anytime we violated the covenant, and on this event which we commemorate, both our redemption from Egypt under the leadership of Moshe, and then later Yeshua paying that price. He was the Passover lamb, the Yom Kippur sacrifice, the sin offering for the priest, the leaders, the community that wasn't even there at the time, the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Oh, he died for the Jews too. Don't let anybody tell you that lie that he came only, that the Jews are out of the picture now. They're not. And brothers and sisters, our kinsmen in the land are going to pay a heavy price to hang on to that land. And Mashiach has promised that we who are not in the land will one day go home and will come to their aid, because it's his plan. We're scattered throughout all the nations. He's going to come and take us home. Home, which is way bigger than people think it is. And don't lambaste our Arab kinsmen so badly, because there are several prophecies that talk about many of them seeing the light too. It is quite possible that they and our Jewish brothers in the land who do not yet see Yeshua as Messiah will not see him as Messiah until he returns, until they see him bringing the armies of the 10 tribes to their aid. the tribulation mostly happens to our Jewish brothers in the land. Read Matthew 24 with that in mind. Nobody is going to miss out on the mess that's coming, nor of the victory that will come. And so, I hope I've given you some insight, some things to look at that you probably never thought of. Especially those of you who don't know any of this information at all, who are new, whose knowledge of Scripture is just very basic. You need to stop looking at the Scriptures as the story of the Jews alone. It's our story too. Whether you believe you're one of the descendants of the 10 tribes or not, once you said, I'm going to drink this cup and come into covenant, we drank that cup. We've accepted the blessings and the curse. That's what Yeshua was talking about in the garden when he said, if there was any way possible, Father, that this cup would pass from me. He prayed that 3 times. If there's any other way that your will can be carried out, that I don't have to die, because that's the human part of Yeshua that knew it was going to hurt. Knew it was going to be a lot of pain and suffering. But he went through it. Because when he drank the cup, he accepted the penalty for the murderer. So that his blood could be shed. So, I hope you ponder this and it brings some light. I hope it blesses you because you'll learn something and it will change something. And only the Ruach, the Holy Spirit, can do that. But we have to submit to it. That's why Yeshua was a man, the only man in history who never sinned like we do. It's because he submitted to the Ruach HaKodesh. If you do not keep Torah, or try to keep Torah, it says you do not have the Holy Spirit. You can't pray to have the Holy Spirit come into you. You have to open your heart and let it come in. You have to let it have control and guide you. It doesn't make us keep Torah. It gives us the encouragement and the strength to try to walk it. That doesn't mean we never fall. But we've been given the instructions on what to do to get back up. And that's what he wants us to do. He's not willing that any should perish. Not willing. But he will let, if we're bound and determined that we want to perish, he'll let us. That's what love is. Love says, I have to give you the choice. So, with that in mind, as always, may Yah bless you and keep you. May he keep his hand upon you. May his face shine upon you and give you shalom. Until next time, shalom alaikum.
May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May the light of his countenance shine upon you, and may he be gracious to you and give you peace. In the name of Yeshua, our Messiah. Amen.